lots of really useful stuff. So I was wondering if what we might want to, how you might want to proceed. Do you want me to share screen and go through this? Do we want to do just a check-in, because it's just kind of rough? I'm just wanting to I just want to acknowledge that it's been a couple of rough weeks. I really appreciate you being here with everything that's going on. I know that you've got a lot of pressures across probably a lot of areas of your life. So yeah, so anyhow, thank you. But yeah, so should we share screen? Do you want to talk a little bit about the draft? What would you like to do?
I would, since you just were on this theme, Rowan, I want to acknowledge all the work that you've done. I sent you that in an email yesterday, but I really, you're very gracious about all this, and you've done a ton of work. So thank you. This is the ton of progress. Kevin, you too. We appreciate all of your contributions and help keeping all this going. So you deserve to be acknowledged as well. When this is done, it will be very much because you got it done. So thank you for that. As long as we're acknowledging people's sort of contributions and stresses and things like that. But anyway.
Thank you. Yeah, there's a lot of big brains on this project, so it makes it a lot easier to do some of the background stuff.
How about first of all, I apologize. I haven't read through it very closely. I did get a chance to glance at it real quick. But do you want to just kind of give us an overview and your thoughts about it as we sort of try to decide how to dive into it? Maybe that would be a good way to get started. I don't know.
Sure. The first thing is that I've arranged it into sections that are kind of divvied up. And the way that I did the sections was so with this kind of survey, it's often helpful to start with kind of introductory. We're getting into it. We're asking some kind of intimate questions about who you are, but we're not really asking, we're sort of preparing you for, okay, now we're going to ask some trickier questions. And then I divided it up into sections. So we've got the harassment, and then the IPV, and let's see if sorry, hang on, let me open it up because I've forgotten. Yeah, demographics, then experiences of sexual and gender-based harassment, sexual exploitation, stalking, relationship abuse, and sexual assault. That's all one section. And so we're going to ask all students to complete that so that we can get a sense of whether they've had any of those experiences. If they have had those experiences, then they'll be asked to complete section 3, which talks about disclosure, reporting, and campus response, and section 4, which talks about the impacts of the events that they experienced on them, on their academics and on their life. Then the last section, which if they didn't experience any sexual misconduct, they'll go from being asked about whether they experienced it to this directly, campus attitude, safety, and awareness. And so that's, again, bringing it back to more sort of an emotionally neutral or less potentially emotionally fraught topic before we have them exit. We don't want to be asking them, so did you feel suicidal? And then say, okay, thank you very much for your responses, right? We want to have a way of kind of bringing them back up out of any place where they might have felt uncomfortable. Of course, on every single page, as they go through the survey, and I'm not sure how this will look on the phone, but we really need to give them constantly they have the option to exit the survey immediately if somebody comes and starts looking over their shoulder, or exit and go to resources if they're like, okay, I really need to talk to somebody right now. So, okay. So that's how it's sort of structured. And then I used some of the things that we've learned. So for the demographics, I used the RealD SOGI tables that OHA has prepared, because I felt like those were really good. Caroline had a question asking about sex versus gender, and we really need to ask both of those things because they really are distinct from each other, gender identity and sex. She also asked about polyamorous as a sexual orientation, and I think that would be characterized more as a relationship style rather than an orientation. So I felt like we didn't need to add that there. Okay. Yeah. And then when we get into the questions about harassment, et cetera, I did use some of the questions from the SES and sort of merged them in with ours. I also eliminated or minimized the kinds of sexual contact we were asking about. I described this is what we mean by non-penetrative contact, and this is what we mean by penetrative contact, and asked only about those two things. So we're not, was it oral, anal? We don't care. We just, was it penetrative? Was it non-penetrative? And I'm not sure how useful that, honestly, I'm not sure how useful that distinction is, but I think it's something that people would want to know about. In the IPV, Belle, you made a lot of really good suggestions. I think I put most of your edits in the most recent document. We asked some questions about IPV. I think and then at the end, we asked the safety questions. And the question, I feel safe on this campus, I think is a really interesting one, because that's just kind of in general, when I go to this campus, I feel like I'm going to be safe versus I don't feel like I'm going to be safe. And then I feel safe from these specific things. So I don't know that we can define what we mean by safety. So I don't know. What do you guys think about that?
I mean, I think we discussed this in one of the previous meetings. I really think that we don't need to tell them what we think about safety. What we care about is whether they feel it or not, right? And so we may not be able to discern exactly how people would perceive that differently, but I think the crucial thing is, does one feel that way? And so I don't think we actually need a clear definition of safety. This is one of the sort of self-perception questions rather than did it happen to you? Does it happen to you? That's my starting point on this.
And I agree with Kelly. And also, because of the scope of the surveys and what we're going to ask about prior to them getting to the question, there's probably already in their mind about where we're going and when we ask about safety. Because if you asked about sexual harassment and experience and all these other experiences, and then you start asking about safety, I'm already thinking in terms of that, probably thinking in terms of that, because it kind of, yeah.
I have a slightly different opinion on that. I feel like, again, like we could like kind of priming them to think about that we are asking about sexual violence here, but again, there's no way we can be sure about what's the exact reason that student doesn't feel safe on campus. I think one interesting question to ask is that whether we are curious about whether there's a discrepancy between the answer of do you feel safe on campus and the answer of do you feel safe on do you feel safe from sexual violence, because there are following questions asking specific kind of sexual violence and whether a student feels safe from those violences. So my opinion is that if we think the discrepancy between in general whether the student feels safe and specifically whether the student feels safe from specific sexual violence, might be, is that something we're curious about? If not, I would say that just for a pure sake of make the survey a little bit shorter, I would say that such a broad question might not be like specific enough to ask what we want to ask about.
The statute says, this is if this helps with the kind of, as you're thinking about this, the statute wants us to ask about perceptions of campus safety among members of the campus community. So that's what it says, perceptions of safety. And so I think we get to be we can drill down or keep it as broad as possible. Hi, Holly. Sorry, Holly would like to make a comment. Go ahead.
Hi, all. Sorry to jump on late. I was in another meeting, so very sorry if I'm sharing things and you're like, we've discussed this already. But just thinking about the question about safety, based on what you just shared, Rowan, I'm thinking it sounds like the information we're trying to gather is how students within different communities on campus are feeling safe or not. And so I'm wondering even if the information we're wanting to gather is are certain students from marginalized identities feeling unsafe on campus and which identities are feeling unsafe in addition to our students feeling unsafe because of sexual harassment. And so I'm wondering, I guess, like what specific information we're trying to gather and what we want to do with that. Does that make sense?
Yeah, I think that also makes sense. But if the statutes specifically ask about campus safety instead of like specific sense of safety from sexual violence, then I agree that we need to follow the law and we should ask the broad question, just whether they feel safe or not on campus.
Are you asking, okay, because when I was thinking of the safety question, it was about personal, but Holly, you just said something about like other groups, like you're saying just general campus questions. Like I feel safe on campus because I am part of the majority here. But you're saying ask a question about maybe your perception of safety for certain groups on campus, like LGBT community or something like that, your perception of that. Mm.
I guess what I'm more asking is because I do agree, like, do you feel safe on campus feels like a very broad question and can mean so many different things. So I do think asking that doesn't really give us a lot of context or information because the reasoning could be so many different things. And so I guess I'm wondering, would it make more sense to provide context or at least give folks the opportunity to explain like what that safety means or what it is in relation to? Because I'm thinking students may be answering that not necessarily from just the same perspective of what safety means. Yeah, I guess that's what I'm saying because the question is so broad.
We asked the other questions as follow-up, right? What particular things that make you feel unsafe, right? I haven't looked at the IPV in a while.
Yeah, so I think, so Holly, kind of to get to your point, we do ask folks, we ask about the demographic questions. So we could pull out, 70%, of the campus said that they feel safe here. And of those 70%, 90% of them are, cis white people. Like we could do something like that. So if people wanted to make that analysis, they could. And I apologize. I just put the link for the survey in the chat. I hadn't done that earlier. My bad. So
That's fine.
yeah, so the questions that we're asking right now about safety, let me kind of pull down to them. Sorry, it's at the very, very end of the survey, and we're not the very end, but it's just, there are 4 questions that we ask about.
It's in the chat?
The link to the survey is in the chat. So we ask 5 questions about safety. The following section asks questions about how safe you usually feel at the school. I'm actually just going to share because it's easier than just reading it to you. Let me do that. Make sure I've got it. Here we go. Yeah. Okay. How safe you usually feel at the school. Sorry, I got to move that. Using the scale provided, please indicate your level of agreement with the following statements. I feel safe at the school. I feel safe from sexual harassment at the school. I feel safe from relationship abuse. I feel safe from sexual violence. And by the way, this is the first place in this survey, and this is the only place where we're actually using those terms. So that might be, I think that might be something useful because we're actually naming, do you feel safe from these things? And then I had as a couple of optional questions. Kelly, I remember we discussed this last time. I feel safe during the day when I am on campus, and I feel safe at nighttime when I am on campus. because I felt like there might be a difference that might be helpful, especially for like residential campuses.
And can
How
I just,
about, can I say this? Is it possible for us to ask all the specific questions first and the broad question last? So they ask, I feel safe from sexual harassment, relationship, blah, 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 blah. And then at the end, I feel safe at this school. Do you think that will?
As a researcher, would we be priming people?
It
How-
would be.
what-
It would be priming them for those specific questions, but
there was another section where we had a similar discussion about strategy. Rowan, do you remember offhand what that was and how we, or is that maybe this is it? Maybe this is the one I'm thinking of.
I think this is the one. Yeah, I think this is the
Okay.
one we keep getting stuck on, kind of.
Yeah, I mean, I'm of the mind. I mean, I certainly agree with the mechanical logic that you're deploying here.
Mhm.
I tend to think it's kind of 6 of one, half dozen of the other in terms of what the risk reward is. I think it's usually, especially in a survey like this, it's a good idea. This is kind of endorsing, I think, your logic. I mean, I think it's okay, maybe even a good idea to kind of prime people's thinking a little bit. Remember that in all the discussions we've had about will people consider X to be, abuse? Will they consider Y to be abuse? Will they consider Z to be abuse? By linking with a bunch of specific examples, it helps prime people's thinking about the range of possibilities that we might be thinking about. So just in general, I think priming is okay. I'm sort of thinking, I'm not even sure that general question is necessary now, because if you lead with it, they're going to feel like they have to pick something from the list. If they go through the list and then get the question, if they've answered yes to any of them, they're going to feel like they have to say yes to that. So I'm not even sure that general question is adding anything, except if it sort of, I think it's a good idea so that we fulfill the mandate of the statute, right? We have a very the simple question that, sorry, I'm doing my sometimes instance of just thinking out loud and going in circles here, but I'm okay with the priming. I can see a reason to put that question at the beginning or at the end. And so I agree with your logic. I can also see why we might lead with it too. That's all. Sorry.
You know what? Can I ask a question? How about I just feel safe instead of strongly agree the scale being that scale? Maybe the scale should be from sexual blah blah blah, from relationship abuse, from stalking blah 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 blah, and just put this as one question. I feel safe, and the from and the from sexual, so the 3 4 forums, those are the options, and then the option I do not feel safe. I mean, I feel safe from all these things, and then I don't know what other options, but just have that as the options that they could like pull down or select, and we can add something else too, or maybe they can write in something. Did we have that as before? And I'm going back to that. I'm getting lost. I'm sorry.
I'm wondering when you're doing analysis on questions like this, and I'm asking you guys as researchers, because I am not a researcher, is it easier to have them broken out like this and then have the Likert, or is it because we're not, if we do that, we're not really giving, people could say, yeah, I feel pretty safe from stalking at the school, or yes, definitely feel safe. It would be both the same answer, right?
I don't want, am I cutting anybody off? Anybody else want to go first and respond?
Yeah, go ahead, Kelly. Go ahead.
Okay. Well, Rowan, I think it depends on what, as the researcher, what it is that you really want to know. And I think given the mandate and the purpose of this, we want to know the general answer, right? We want to know, do you feel safe at this school? But we also would really like to know that if you don't, does your insecurity relate to any of these 4 or 5 sort of common sources. So as a researcher, A, I love the Likert scale, and B, I would be comfortable probably just saying, if you say anything other than strongly agree to all of these, I'm going to assume you would also say something other than strongly agree to I feel safe. In other words, does that make sense? If you're anywhere but on the extreme security side on all 4 of those, I would think you feel safe. But now I'm talking myself into keeping that general question. I think I like knowing, I wasn't thinking about this as on the 7-point response scale. I think I like asking the general question to get their sense of a degree of agreement on that, and then ask about the specific things as well. So sorry, to answer your question specifically, I don't think I think that question needs to be in there now. Sorry, I hope that was.
So when we put the questions in this order, so I feel safe
Yeah.
from sexual harassment, if we put those types first and then I feel safe at the school, that feels weird to me to have that question after those questions.
Yeah, because you
Because-
usually go broader to specific, but I was thinking of maybe priming them, but they're kind of already primed by the survey itself, so
Yeah.
maybe not.
Yeah. So I
Okay.
feel like we either leave it out or we leave it where it was.
I think it could go either way. I think honestly, I'm leaning towards agreeing with Adea that it makes sense to have that at the end, but I don't feel so strongly about that I mean, I think it's really just a question of perception. The Likert scale to me is the crucial point. I think we're going to get pretty similar results either way.
So you don't think just having, because I'm just thinking on the back end, what Rowan was saying, on the back end, it's just gonna be a percentage, the percentage of people who strongly agreed to these statements. So you're
Right.
looking at the percentage of people, but if we say feel free from, so you're like the percentage of people who said they feel safe from sexual harassment. So that's yes or no. So either they said they felt free from it, or they didn't select it. So they, or something like that. So it was either yes, they felt free from this, free from that. So it just puts it as a yes, no, but it condenses it.
Right. Here's actually to that whole mechanical logic, Adea, I'm now going to offer a reason to agree with Rowan's desire to have it at the front. When you think about the psychological exercise of doing this, like precisely to the example that you gave at the beginning, when we all first hopped on here, and I only caught the back end of it, but like that question is going to be way easier for somebody to answer at the beginning than it is at the end of that list. They will go through all 4 of those questions and then be asked a general question, and then they will struggle to figure out, especially like, so for instance, let's say that you say, I feel completely safe from, or rather, let's say I don't feel safe from harassment, but I do feel safe from or I do feel safe from relationship abuse. Now you get to that general question if it's at the end, and you're not at all sure how to answer it, because now you have to decide, how do I weight these different things? So in order to come up with a location on that Likert scale, does that make sense? That if you ask that question first, people can just answer it. And then they're more comfortable answering the specific things. If you ask those specific things and then get to the general question, they have to figure out how to add up their answer to those 4 questions and place it on a Likert scale. And I think that's a really challenging psychological exercise.
Okay.
So discussing it this way, I hadn't even thought about that. But I can answer that question easy if it's the beginning, hard if it's at the end.
Yeah. Okay.
Does that make sense? I feel like I'm grappling a little bit, but does that make sense?
Yes, that makes sense. The only other thing, but you still think it should be a scale, and it shouldn't just be one question, get rid of that scale and just have a yes, no type thing, meaning if they select it, like I feel safe from, and then all these options, and just have those as an option, and it'll be basically yes, no type of thing if they select it.
I mean,
It just saves space. It just saves time.
no, I like it.
But
I mean, I personally, and I apologize, I don't want this to just be a dialogue between me and one other person.
oh no, it's everybody else.
You
Sorry.
guys are the researchers, and this is research detail stuff, so I'm just letting you guys go.
Well, everybody loves the 5-point scale, but I'm just looking when Rowan said on the back end, I was like, well, okay, you're gonna get a lot of neither agree or disagree. I really, either they feel safe from it or they don't.
I think, I mean,
Right? You
we
think
could
we
just
get more information about neither agree, not disagree, or
well,
because basically at the end we're gonna end up grouping agree and strongly agree together and disagree and strongly disagree together, and then you're gonna have a few in the middle. And is that gonna give us meaningful information?
I mean, I think you're making a pretty compelling argument for that first question to just be yes or no. I mean, I think I still lean towards the Likert, but the yes or no is a clear categorical response. We'd like to know, and then ask people to think about the different ways. I mean, welcome to surveys, right? Like they're
I mean, there's several ways to do it, but that's just
right.
what I'm thinking about.
There's going to be reasons to do everything different ways, and there won't be an obvious reason to do one or the other. I think it just boils down to what we think we want to know.
Yeah.
And
So
I
I
think
think
I was just,
Go ahead, Val.
sorry, Rowan, I was just going to say, I think I would stick with the Likert scale for that question, even though I would not argue against the yes, no either, but I think the Likert makes sense.
Well, it's really not yes or no. I mean, when it comes down to the others, it's just
Right.
either, those experiences or.
I personally think that from the perspective of doing data analysis, a Likert skill kind of give us more things to do. Because if it's just yes and no, it's dichotomized. And dichotomized variables like you can do chi-square things with it to analyze it, but for Likert skill, they're like, because it's like from 0 to 5, so you can also kind of sort of do correlation. And if you don't like it being like from 0 to 5, you can always categorize them into different beans and do a slightly different kind of analysis. I would say that a Likert skill compared to yes and no probably give the data analyst a little bit more space to play with the data analysis, especially we have already mentioned that different different communities, different maybe racial groups on campus probably could have different experience about safety when it comes to wanting to measure this nuanced difference between different racial groups. I wonder whether having a more sensitive or nuanced options like Likert skill would actually help with the data analysis to be able to detect those probably not very big effect. I would say that I support to use Likert skill, even though I acknowledge it is not concise enough. And yes and no, and having a following list of all kind of violence is definitely more concise and efficient with regard to letting people go through the survey as fast and in fact effective as possible. But I would say that from a data analysis perspective, I would have concern about if we only offer dichotomized options here, whether it sabotage the following analysis that we can do on this.
I
Well,
just said
you
yes or no. It's not actually yes and no, but
Okay.
I was just saying, just feel free from, and then instead of strongly agree, it will be the sexual harassment at school will be an option. Relationship abuse will be an option. Those everything from will just be an option there. And then prefer not to answer, not applicable, and write in or something like that, or I don't know, the write in wouldn't matter here. But anyway, we could keep it like that. I may be overthinking it, so it's fine.
Well, I was just going to say you'd get an A in my surveys class for that answer. That was fantastic. That is exactly what we should do. When in doubt, ask yourself, how are you going to analyze this? That should be what we go with. And so that's usually one of the last things people come to realize because they're struggling so hard to keep up with the learning. So props to you. That's a great answer, and I agree with you.
And Belle will be looking for work, so just like keep her in mind for, yeah. So I'm thinking about it from the perspective of someone answering this question. And I think, Adea, your question, I feel free from sexual harassment, is a different question than I feel safe from sexual harassment.
Free.
And,
I'm sorry, safe.
Okay.
Sorry.
Okay. And I think if I was answering this and, you know, I felt pretty safe from sexual, I wasn't sure that I felt completely safe from sexual harassment, but you're only giving me the options of yes, no, unsure, I don't know, prefer not to answer, not applicable. It would be, if I wasn't really, you know, I'm not really sure, I kind of agree. It would be harder for me to say yes, I think.
Okay, so that in between, that more information that you get from a 5-point scale, then what would make sure? Okay. Okay.
Yeah.
Then if it's something that where people have the feelings that maybe a little bit, yeah, then a broader scale gives more information.
But I do agree that we're going to end up bucketing it to strongly agree, and disagree, strongly disagree, and everything else. Like, I really think we're going to end up bucketing it like that, but I think it's just going to be easier for people to answer if they have, because if I felt mostly safe, but not always, I might want to answer no if the only other option was yes, I guess.
Okay, then. Okay.
Does that?
Okay, yeah.
Well, I totally agree with that. I think that's absolutely right. Like, you want people to be able to draw a distinction between agreeing and strongly agreeing, even if we know, Adea, I agree with you, even if we know analytically we're going to consolidate those categories. I mean, unless we find some real consistent pattern in the separation of those, we're very likely to just consolidate them into agree, neutral, disagree. But I think people in responding need to have that distinction. So I would agree with you, Rowan. That's the right approach.
Okay. So no change.
Okay. This is so nerdy. I love this stuff. This is awesome, you guys. Okay.
And there's never a right answer. That's the best part. Right?
Exactly. Yeah, for sure.
There's only
this is
what
like
you
a
decide
seminar.
to do.
Yeah. Okay, so we've got those, and then I've just got these. One thing I suggested, I at the beginning, I thought about this, and then I didn't really do anything with it. But if there are questions that we want to remove, because there are 153 questions, folks, if there are questions we want to remove, but we think they're important questions, we could put them in like an appendix in the implementation guide and say, these are some questions that we think are important, but we, for conciseness sake, we left out of the main survey, but, campuses may wish to add these questions. You wouldn't need to come back to the council and ask if they were okay, because we've already okayed them. Yeah. Because remember, one of the options that folks have is they can add questions specific to their campus, but you guys are going to have to decide this. If you want to be able to come back as a group and review the questions to make sure they're trauma informed and appropriate. So you could say, these are questions that we've already approved. You don't need our approval on these again if you want to ask them.
I love that. I think that's a great idea. We may even just do something simple like classify every single question as a primary question and a secondary question, so that we have a survey that we consider the minimum, and then we have a survey that we consider the maximum. And I think we should probably only have two categories there, essential versus optional.
Yeah, because I was thinking that, I was like, because all the 153 questions, I don't know which one is statutory and which ones we kind of added onto it. So, yeah.
Something I want to do before our next meeting, when I really look at this, is kind of try to get a sense for what would this look like if I were somebody who just answered the shortest possible version, right? Like I'm not experiencing any of these things. And then what would it look like if I was having to do the longest possible version, which of course would be 153 questions probably, but just where do those conditionals impact come and go? But I think that's a great idea, Rowan. Like thinking about this as primary and kind of secondary, not in terms of importance, but in terms of to your language, they sort of meeting the statutory requirements, I think will help us with the real discomfort I had when I first saw 153 questions.
I know. And just to remind you all, this is about where we usually end up with the number of questions on a sexual misconduct survey. Kelly, I don't remember, how many questions did your survey have?
We just did campus climate, and it was a lot. I can't remember the exact number, but it was well into the high 70s, 80s, 90s, and may have been into the hundreds altogether. Which is,
Dea, you
go ahead.
I have no remembers. I have to look at the document. But it was a lot. It was a lot because I remember the campus, because we had to ask about, we did the ecological model. So we asked about the relationship with the administration and the campus as a whole, and an administration response to if you did a report. So just that alone was 20 questions. If someone said they actually submitted a report, like, did they allow you to do this? Did they allow you to do that? What was their response? Did they protect you? And all these other things. So we went into a lot of details about the administration because, yeah, so that alone was like 20 questions. So I'm thinking it was north of 100.
I think that one thing, so Kelly, what you just said, and Adele, what you just said, I think it kind of leads to maybe a way of looking at reviewing the survey. And that would be for you all to go through it and have three categories, right? Cut this out. I hate this question. This question is definitely got to stay in there. This question should be optional, right? Okay. So if you could have those three categories, and then for the questions that you felt need to be rewritten, then you could make a note on that too. But I think, cut, keep, make optional. If you had those three categories, that might help. I don't know how much we're actually, I think when we get into things like the relationship abuse questions, where we're asking about the coercive control stuff, it's going to be really tricky. Because coercive control can take so many different faces, and we don't want to eliminate somebody from those questions. However, I still think there's places that we can make cuts. And then there could be a fourth category, add this question.
Are we going to take it as pen and paper, or are we going to take it, or are you going to have it in Qualtrics, and for us to really, really get a sense of it?
So we, for the review, I would recommend doing it pen and paper or on your screen. We don't have Qualtrics yet. I'm actually meeting with the Qualtrics data person tomorrow afternoon. Is it data or data? Which guys what do y'all prefer? I don't care.
I don't care.
Okay.
I think,
yeah. It's so weird. So I'm meeting with the data person tomorrow afternoon, finally, yay. And so I'm going to ask about, this is what we need. We need to be able to get this into Qualtrics and another platform. We need to have it available for people to pilot on a laptop and on a phone. And that's going to be like, and we want to do that in a month. So, that's my goal. My goal is still for us to be able to have a final version of the survey, even if it isn't in Qualtrics, for the council to review as a whole at the end of February, and hoping we'll get quorum next time. If we don't, we need to move forward anyhow, but I want to give them the full council an opportunity to review it and discuss it.
Okay, when do you want us to take it and get back to you? I guess we're not going to have a meeting before this time, our group. So maybe in a week or so, you want us to take it and get back to you?
Do you, based on everything that's going on in your whole world, do you have time to review 153 questions and categorize them as cut, keep, make optional in a week? Could you do that in a week?
I think so. I can. I mean, I will I'll try to organize my life with that as one of my objectives. Yes.
I could do it, but I would have to move some things around, but I could do it. I'll probably have to do it over the weekend. My weekends, I can do it. If I include my weekends, it's possible.
Rowan, given that I've already reviewed all the combined questions, is there anything that you want me to do that could be helpful?
If you felt like there were questions that were extras that could be optional, that'd be really helpful. If you went through and just went
Okay.
like, yeah, I think you're asking 10 questions about this topic. You know, only 7 of them are necessary or something like
Okay.
that. That'd be helpful.
Sounds good.
But yeah, I think looking for places that we can cut. And I'd like to invite our guests. You have the link to the survey there. If you would like to send comments, I'm going to put my email in the, oh my God, did I not, hang on. I didn't put it in the chat, did I? Oh, shoot.
Yeah, that's why I
am
was having
so sorry,
problems.
folks. It was in the
Oh, it's there
chat and
now.
then I forgot to, I apologize. You guys are so kind to me. Okay. I'm going to put my email in here. So guests, if you want to go through it and make comments for us to review, I'd be happy to do that. Let me put my email in here. If I can remember my email. Okay, there we go. All right. Sorry. All right, there we go. Okay. All right, folks. So there's the survey, and you should be able to link. Let me know. Could somebody try opening that? Make sure that I gave you the right link. Let's do that before we leave. Okay, great. Okay,
Can
good.
the guests, if they're not on Basecamp, can they download it with the link?
Be able to.
I was
okay.
able to download it. Yes.
Okay.
Thank you.
Thanks, Holly. Okay.
Yeah, of course.
And then
Thank you.
there's my email. So, you know, if you don't have the email, you can always come back to this meeting, and my email's in here too. Can we shoot for a meeting? And Kelly, I see that you've got to leave in like 12 minutes. I think we're going to be okay. Could we maybe take a look at scheduling next Thursday or Friday right now? That would save us some time. For those of you who are here, and then we'll just hope that Caroline and the others can join us.
I'm okay. I'm open Friday. I'm all the way open. I don't have any appointments, at least right now.
I'm also open the whole Friday.
I am open 9 to 10 and then probably 11 and after that. So I have something at 10 o'clock. I could move it if I were the only obstacle, and I'd be happy to try that. And Thursday morning, this time it works too.
Okay, why don't we try for Friday? That gives you an extra day. So why don't we try for Friday? Do you want to do morning or afternoon?
I'd go with morning, all of the things being equal, but I could do either one.
I'm flexible.
So like 9
Kelly,
o'clock. Well,
9 o'clock?
how long do we want to meet? Do we want to meet for 90 minutes? Actually, I could, yeah, 9 o'clock and 90 minutes, I could do that. The meeting, I would just start at 30 minutes later. So 9 to 10:30 would work for me.
Dan Bell?
I'm
That
fine.
works.
I'm fine.
Kevin,
As long as you get on my schedule real fast.
Kevin, is 9 o'clock doable for you? Because Kevin has to set up the meeting and record it and everything. So, and I know Kevin was going to have to. Kevin had some things happening at the house, so let's assume we're good for 9 o'clock on Friday, unless you hear otherwise. How's that?
9 o'clock
Okay.
on Friday is good.
Oh, Kevin just said it's good.
Oh, thank you, Kevin. Okay. All right, great. Okay, so 90 minutes, and thank you so much for your flexibility, folks.
Yes.
Is there anything else that you want to review or discuss right now, or should I give you your time back?
I would say there's just one thing, because Caroline and I both left comments there. If you guys can read through comments, if you guys have the time and like have like strong opinions to any of the comments that we left, I think at least I personally would really appreciate you guys' opinion on some of the comments that I left. Don't know, I can't represent Caroline to say anything, but I imagine she would appreciate if you guys at least can read through her suggestions.
For sure.
I think I went through some of her comments, but not since everything got put together. And I can look through yours as well. Did you want to say anything, Rowan, about the language? Because remember, you said something about language. So did you want to say anything now about that, or?
Thanks. Yeah, I kind of made a note. I have a tendency, and I know a lot of us do because we're in academic settings, to write in an academic manner. But I'd like us to remember that this is going to be read by a lot of folks, including folks who, we're not at private universities. And I'd like us, and also when you're dealing with an emotionally fraught topic, sometimes keeping things in the vernacular is in more informal language than academic language. So if there are places where you can see where we can streamline the way the language is, make it more readable, make it, maybe lower the reading level on it, increase the comprehension level, those would be really helpful comments to make. Thanks for that, Adea.
Is there, I know there's something out there where you could check the reading level. Is there anything out online or a source where you could check the comprehension level?
Yeah, the language committee has a few different tools for that
Okay.
in their folder.
Okay,
But yeah, if you
I'll
pull,
check.
yeah, it'll be harder, I think, with the questions. I think you can, but they usually want like a paragraph, but
Okay.
especially in the introductory stuff. But yeah.
Okay.
But I think thinking about fewer syllables is sort of how I always sort of,
Okay.
in my brain, like, can I say this in fewer words? Can I say this in fewer syllables?
Right.
If I read this out loud, does it sound like conversational or does it sound weird?
Okay. Thank you.
That can have such a huge impact too on just sort of emotional energy, right? The simpler the sentence, the simpler, the longer you'll stay with the questions. Even if it takes you the same length of time, your psychological energy doesn't get drawn down from processing.
Okay. I'll be mindful of that. Thank you.
Yep.
I think that's it. If we could go ahead, Bill and we can go ahead and call the meeting adjourned. Okay, thank you, everyone.
Thank you all. This is